Good morning. George, this is for you and probably anyone else that is looking to begin learning about the tanning process. So this is just really going to cover the initial fleshing portion of the process. It's relatively simple. The sooner you can get to the fleshing portion of it, the better, because then you can actually keep the hides for a length of time. But if you leave the fat and the flesh and the blood and all that on there, you're not going to get a lot of life expectancy out of that hide. So you do want to scrape that off as quickly as possible. So we're going to go through this process fairly quickly, hopefully. I have a hide. I actually soaked it just to soften it up, and then I just kind of left it hanging there for a little while. So it's going to be dry in some spots, but the main portion is to get as much of the fat and flesh off of the hide as possible. And then once that's done, you can actually throw it over a line, or you can roll it up and freeze it. But for the most part, this is more of a method of preservation, as well as helping you through the initial hide tanning process. So I'm going to set this up so you can see everything. So I have what we'll call a hudush, or a scraping log or beam, and what will happen is we'll lay the hide across that. With fleshing, there's really no way of doing it other than just getting the fat, flesh, blood, clots, any membranes or anything that's sticking out there, try to make it as smooth as possible. It'll be a lot more supple. So what I'll do is I'll take the hide, this is a smaller hide, and then I'll lay it across, hair side down, and then begin scraping. So I'll bring this in a little bit closer just so you can see what you're looking at initially. Often is the case, you're going to see a lot of the fat, and that's going to be kind of fixed onto the inner portion of the skin. You'll also see blood or blood clots. Sometimes you'll see big chunks of meat, typically flank meat, especially around the belly area. That tends to stick onto the hide a little bit more. But the main thing is, while you scrape, you're really trying to get as much of it off as you can, and it doesn't hurt to scrape again. There's a really good reason for that, is because once you start soaking the hide, you're really going to want to have as much water penetrating the hide as possible. And if you leave a layer of fat on, it's just not going to happen. And so you're going to end up soaking the hide for a number of days, and there's really not going to be any loosening of the hair follicles at all. So what I typically do is I use a scraper. The scraper is not sharp. It looks sharp, but it's really, the science is how the blade is actually a 90 degree, and you're using the very corner of that. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna start, I'll typically start anywhere on the hide, working from the center out, and you'll end up getting a lot of this fat and flesh off of there. You do wanna make sure you clean the blade quite often, because if it's full or chalky or even full of hair, it's not gonna pick up. And so and you'll also notice by doing this, the friction is creating enough heat to actually make the hide really soft and break some of that up. So that'll change, definitely. So don't overlook this part. It's relatively simple, but you really want to make sure that you do a good job on here. As a matter of fact, going through the tanning process, you're gonna find, like, every good instructor is gonna look at you and say, do that part really well. It's the most important part, because every part is the most important part. Actually, there's no process portion of the tanning process that is going to or should be overlooked. Because if you screw up on one part and you don't do a good job, or you're a little lazy, you're gonna be back doing that very same thing all over again. And that's any stage of this. So you may be back fleshing again if you trying to hurry up and get it done. It's just not a good thing to do. Get the edges really good. The edges also, because they're cut, they also allow for better water penetration through the sides of it as well. So these are things that you're gonna be really focused on, is making sure that you have a nice clean hide to work with. Some of the hair is already coming off, which is fairly typical, especially in smaller deer, fresh deer as well. But sometimes the hair just, you can't move it. You soak it for a few days and it's still, nothing's gonna happen. So there are some methods, but once we have the flesh off of the hide itself, and we're able to get the water to soak, what you're looking for at that point, you may not like it, but it makes sense, is you do want the flesh, or I'm sorry, you do want the hide to start rotting a little bit. Rotting really is basically a way of the fibers to start breaking down and loosening up. It's not horrible. If you're sensitive to the smells, this isn't the job for you. You continue to pay whatever you have to for any deer hides. But I can tell you right now, if you're a tanner, you're fairly used to pretty offensive smells, or should be. If you got a light stomach, I tell you what, you're not always going to be working with fresh hides. Your buddy's going to shoot one and leave one in the trunk of his old 72 Dodge Dart, 80-degree weather. It's going to be full of maggots. And then he's going to come over and be like, you make me some deer hide out of this? I want it nice. I want it to smell real good. I want it soft and smoky. I want to make my snag a set of moccasins that she'll just go crazy for. And that's not what reality is. So this hide is fleshed. So that's really all it takes. I mean, theoretically, in all reality, go through it a few times. You'll always pick up more flesh. So once this fat comes off, it does open up a lot of the pores so the water can soak through. And it does kind of soften up the hide. But this is gonna go back into water. And then these hairs will start loosening up. One of the things I also do, just as a tip, is because the hair on the collar tends to be a little thicker and hold on a little bit longer through the bucking process, which is basically removing the hair, I may run the scraper through a few times just to lift those hair and follicles up, and also remove some of it, open it up just a little bit. Because this hair is so thick, and deer hair is hollow, and it tends to almost be waterproof. I mean, I've had hides sitting in water for 3 or 4 days, and I started doing this part, and it's just as dry as ever. It's just like nothing. So some of the larger bucks, I know some of my mentors will actually buzz some of the hair or cut some of the hair down just to open up those hollow fibers a little bit. But in doing this, you actually make it easier for the water to penetrate the toughest part of the scraping. This is where you're gonna spend most of your time. So that's done. So all I'll have to do is put this in a bucket of water, but I'm going to soak it. And when you do, the best thing to do is actually just make sure that it's fully submerged in the water. You do want this to get saturated in all parts. So I got another one to do right now, but that's it. Make sure you just scrape the flesh off. I'll get you your tools if you need and lend you a scraping log or hadush, and you can get started on that. When we get to bucking, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll get to that point as well. So thanks for tuning in.